Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to JMT's Expert Speaker Series. We're going to wait another minute to get started. We still have some people logging in, so please hang with us, and we will be right back. All right. Thank you again for joining JMT Consulting for our Expert Speaker Series. We are happy to have John Davidoff from Davidoff Strategy presenting today on an introduction to mission-driven strategic planning. This webinar is sponsored by JMT Consulting. We're an ERP and financial management solutions firm. We have 27 years experience and we specialize only in nonprofits. We also work with a wide variety of software partners to find the best solutions for your nonprofit. I'd like to share a few housekeeping notes with you, and then I will turn it over to John. If you have any questions at all during the webinar, please submit your questions in the questions box on your control panel. We will answer questions at the end of the webinar. You'll also receive a survey at the end to tell us how we did today, so we greatly appreciate any feedback that you have. And just a reminder that today's webinar will be recorded and will be sent out to you tomorrow along with slides and a follow-up email. Finally, I would like to introduce John Davidoff. John has 36 years of experience working with nonprofits, associations, foundations, and businesses, and is an established thought leader on organizational strategy, leadership, and transformation. He's currently pursuing his doctorate in transformational leadership and coaching. We are happy to have him with us today, and with that, I will hand it over to John.
Melissa, thank you so very much, and good afternoon to everyone in the parts of the country that are past noon, and for our Western U.S. friends, good morning to you. So a little information about Davidoff Strategy. We're finishing our 14th year, and over the 14 years, we've supported hundreds of nonprofits and philanthropic foundations, as well as associations and businesses. Our core competency is strategy, and that's what I want to work with you all on today. And we use strategy and apply it to the area of strategic planning, which is our focus for today's webinar. We also use strategy in marketing planning, in thought leadership, in conference management, and in supporting organizations to create high-performing cultures. And our business does this through consulting, training, and coaching. We have offices in Chicago and Washington, D.C., and our clients are all over the country. So that's a little bit about Davidoff Strategy, and here's a logo page to have you get a sense of some of the company that we keep. We're very honored, and as an entrepreneur, it's been a privilege, and our clients have helped us grow as we've helped them grow, and we feel, again, very honored to be able to do the work, as I'm guessing all of you feel for your respective organizations. So let's move on to the subject for today, something near and dear to me, mission-driven strategic planning. And I want to acknowledge that because of JMT's orientation to financial and administrative aspects of nonprofit organizations, I'm going to guess that a lot of you have a financial orientation or administrative orientation towards your organizations. And so I am going to keep that in mind so that we can help you apply our mission-driven strategic planning process in support of a financially and administratively managed and sound organization. I think those two areas are really, really important and related to strategic planning. Let me start by telling you that a mission-driven strategic business plan in the ideal functions as your development officer's primary fundraising tool. So when they're coming to you and saying, we'd like to invest X amount of dollars in a strategic planning process or staff or however, whatever kinds of resources they're looking, I want to support you to consider that this is a great investment in driving more dollars, more resources into your organization and provide the comfort that you're looking for as the financial watchdog, financial managers on behalf of the leadership of the organization. So again, in the ideal, the end product, your strategic plan, in our minds, should become something that's shareable to current and prospective funders, that shows the direction of your organization and what you are asking current and prospective funders to invest in. So as financial and administrative leadership, we encourage you to expect that the money your organization invests in a strategic plan comes back manyfold through development, fundraising, as well as creating higher performing teams throughout your organization. So for all of you, whatever your orientation is in your organization, we want to support you to have a determination to expect a lot from your strategic plan. And speaking of determination, let me start out by asking you a few questions, and these are somewhat rhetorical because we're not going to actually have a group discussion today, but curious, how well can you and your organization answer the following questions? What is your personal mission and vision? Do you have one? Do you talk about it? Second, what is your organization's mission and vision? Can I guess that you have one? Do you know it? Does everyone in your organization know it? Can they talk about it? Part of our philosophy is that everyone in your organization should be empowered as if they are the CEO or development officer, because you never know who they're going to be talking to at that weekend barbecue or tailgating at the football game or wherever they are. They may be talking to someone who would like to be an investor or already is part of your one of your stakeholder groups. So you want to make sure everyone can talk about the organization's mission and vision in their own words. They don't have to memorize what's ever on your website, but in their own words, can they really reflect it and make it heartfelt. How about principles? I know you all have principles, but have you named what they are? And do you and your colleagues orient towards principles? So what principles do you use in your work? We're going to get a little bit more into principles later. And does your organization have principles, and do you talk about them? Number 4, how are you and your organization learning and growing? Here's our company's determination statement. We worked on this for several years, and we read it once a week in our weekly staff meeting. We actually have it, we all have it memorized. We read it with great gusto, and I'll read it to you. Says, we commit to creating a world of mission-driven organizations that inspire, energize, and drive purposeful and right actions. We strive to help our clients step into a transformational vision of what is possible, to create and strengthen relationships with stakeholders, to promote the principle of excellence, and to impact the world at large. And at the end of our determination statement, our entire team stands up and we go into the power pose. Because there's some research out there that shows if you hold the power pose for as much as a minute or longer, it actually can put your whole mindset and physical self and change your whole attitude and behaviors about the rest of the day, the next hour, the next 5 minutes. It can really shift into a positive place, which is really important for mission drivers to have a lot of hope and faith and to stay positive and on their own side. And you know, in these days and age where we all have to-do lists that are practically impossible to even get past the second or third thing on any given day, being on our own side makes a lot of sense. So we wanted to share our determination statement, encourage you to consider that for your organizations as well. So how did we get into strategic planning? Our roots go all the way back to marketing days, but as we started being asked to apply our marketing strategy to organizational strategy, we found out that a lot of organizations have relatively thin strategies. And so we wrote an article, When Missions Go Missing. And that became the first of several articles that we've written over the years. They're all available on our website and make for good discussion pieces. But here's what we learned about when missions go missing. We developed our approach out of our own dissatisfaction with traditional strategic planning processes. We noticed that many strategic plans were thin on critical thought. They were absent of a consideration for the internal dynamics and the external environments in which business was being conducted. They were more like business checklists than strategic thinking. They lacked sort of a comprehension and a comprehensiveness that we thought would really be more effective and useful for an organization. So in response, we applied best practices from traditional strategic planning and reframe them in the context of supporting organizations to achieve new levels of untapped potential. So for those of you with a finance orientation, now we're talking about your assets. Do you have underutilized assets in your organization? Do you have assets that you can drive more value, achieve more value out of? Do you have assets you work with the same assets and achieve greater results against your organizational mission? That to us is what mission-driven strategic planning is all about. A lot of our work, so after we wrote the article, we went back to school and literally got graduate degrees. And as Melissa said at the beginning of our program, I'm working on a doctorate in transformational leadership. So when we use buzzwords like transformation and any other buzzwords that may come across here, we actually take them very seriously and invested in studying them and understanding. So I'm going to throw a little grad school at you in this one slide. This is it. But it's the 4 I's of transformational leadership. And we use this as an orientation with nonprofit organizations that we believe your strategic plan should reflect these 4 I's. This comes out of 2 thought leaders, a guy named Bass and a guy named Riggio, who I've had a chance to meet and work with a little bit. But their 4 I's are idealized influence, where the leader serves as an ideal role model for followers and is admired for this. And so that can be both individual leaders, teams of leaders, and the whole organization. Inspirational motivation. Transformational leaders and transformational organizations have the ability to inspire and motivate followers. Third one, individualized consideration. Transformational leaders demonstrate genuine concern for the needs and feelings of followers, which brings out the best efforts from each individual internally and externally. And then intellectual stimulation. In our world today, I think we would call this good critical thinking. Transformational leaders challenge followers to be innovative and creative. So as you go back and maybe look at your current strategic plan, you might want to take the 4 I's and do a scan and say, influence, motivation, individualized consideration, critical thought, is that all in here? Here's another chart that I think is good for you as you look at where your strategic planning is now and where you could take it. And this is what, in our mind, sets a mission-driven business strategy apart from the traditional strategy. So in traditional strategic planning, you essentially have a checklist of things to do. In a mission-driven strategic plan, your plan is orients the organization towards identifying and achieving untapped potential. Traditional planning is kind of a chore, a rote process, something we're supposed to do. Mission-driven strategic planning actually rallies your troops, including your employees, your board, your staff, your funders, your partners, the media. You can get everyone who's invested in the success of your organization involved in your strategic planning. Traditional strategic planning really offers nothing new. Where there's nothing new, nothing really changes. In mission-driven strategic planning, it's all about paradigm shifts that name and vision new ways to establish organizational relevance and effectiveness, because we all know the world changes really quick these days, socially, economically, politically, the morning after election night. I mean, it's a new day in a lot of ways. And organizations need to adjust and shift quickly. In the traditional strategic plan, they tend to avoid doing things that are going to create anxiety in the organization or become additional burden of responsibility. They also shy away from challenging stakeholders. A mission-driven strategic plan understands that there is healthy anxiety and there's a way to challenge stakeholders, leaders, employees, funders, the board, towards in service of the mission and vision. And finally, in a traditional strategic plan, the organization is blind to the internal dynamics and external environments. We have a whole training we do with our clients on how to identify drama in the workplace culture and shift it, because drama can be a barrier to organizational effectiveness. It reduces organizational productivity. So in a mission-driven strategic plan, we intentionally set out to increase self-awareness and address those blind spots head-on. Here are some other distinctions of a high-performance organization reflected in a mission-driven strategic plan. And part of our process that we want to encourage you to do is actually to do an assessment of your organization and look at it and to ask, where is my organization mission challenged and where is it mission driven? And we actually create a balance sheet. We have the mission challenge side on one side and the mission driven side. And part of what we're doing in mission driven strategic planning is identifying those mission challenged qualities and creating plans to move them over to the mission driven side of the equation, balance sheet. On the mission-driven side, we're looking to say, okay, how do we flip on the up? We have strengths here. How can we leverage those strengths and actually drive more out of the organization towards its mission? So here's some examples of mission challenge versus mission-driven, from burned out to energized, reactive to proactive, closed-minded versus curious, cultural deadness versus inspirational, siloed communication versus cohesive communication. Mission challenged organizations have a not my job attitude in their culture. In mission driven, people have each other's backs, shared ownership. Mission challenged cultures tend to be apathetic, don't really care, just a job. A mission driven side care very much, passionate, more than a job, my life. Mission challenged organizations have a fixed mindset, things like, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough people. Growth mindset is, we can do that. We'll figure it out. We'll bring self-efficacy to the table. Nothing can stop us. Mission challenged organizations tend to be risk averse. Mission driven organizations tend to be risk takers. Mission challenged organizations lack clarity. mission-driven organizations have a high degree of purpose. Mission-challenged organizations, process-oriented. Mission-driven, understand that vision plus process is the pathway to excellence in all that it does. Mission-challenged organizations have outgrown and outdated systems, and mission-driven organizations are looking at their systems constantly towards the principle of workability. So here are some outcomes that we want to make sure your strategic plans have. They should have a present state assessment of the organization, and that present state assessment would include a thorough review of your internal organization, your individuals, your teams, and the organization as a whole. You would also do external dynamics, and in a little bit we're going to take you through some of the external dynamics and how we go about that so that you can apply that for yourselves. Your mission-driven strategy should also identify key issues that need to be addressed and to more effectively achieve the organization's mission and vision. You should have an updated vision and mission and be asking always, are we still compelling and are we relevant to those who are investing and to those who we serve? Paradigm shifts. This is something that we've added to our planning, and we have a whole process on how we do this, but paradigm shifts name fundamental changes in perspective, approach, mission, vision, and/or programs. Operating principles that align staff and board. Strategic priorities, no more than a handful. 4 or 5 is more than most organizations can really focus against. And an action plan, including timetable and who owns which pieces of the action plan. And finally, resource recommendations, including implications for budget and human capital and other support. So here's our process, and you're going to get this in the follow-up materials, so you can have this to bring into your organization. Our process starts with the discovery phase. And in the discovery phase, here's where we're working to create an accurate current state picture of how the organization is currently operating. And let me just tell you, in addition to the discovery phase, we have 4 phases that are part of our methodology. I'm going to take you through all 4, so let me continue with the discovery phase. So we build an understanding of the organization's current state. We create a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats assessment by inventorying the organization's assets. And we're looking at both the tangible assets and the intangible assets. We're understanding and identifying the stakeholders' needs and challenges, and we're articulating desired outcomes. And then we're also setting the context to begin envisioning the organization's future and create pathways to move towards the organization's ideal state. So in our discovery phase, where in the old days, we'd have a client, we'd send a truck over and they'd literally send a couple boxes of documents, financial reports, sample grant proposals, fundraising materials, marketing materials, and so on. Today, of course, we get that all electronically. But we have had people give us a lot of material. We've also had clients that have nothing, no material. So what would you give your strategic planning team to get them oriented? We also do stakeholder interviews. And stakeholder interviews are of enormous value if they're done really well. The value in a stakeholder interview is that you're going to get a perspective from someone who is invested in the outcomes that your organization is moving towards. So they're going to give you feedback about you, about your organization, about your peers, where you fit compared to your peers, and so on. And I have been leading strategic planning processes for 14 years now. I've been in front of boards of directors where we've shown them a survey of employees, And they're like, oh, those are just the unhappy employees. And we've shown them what other organizations are doing, and they're like, well, that's great. That's, what their deal is. But then I had one organization where we'd done 25 interviews with stakeholders, funders, people from the mayor's office, peer organizations, and they had some very important feedback that the board of this one organization had not heard. They didn't know it, and literally had never had this before, had people in tears. And that really woke them up, and it led to the transformation of that organization. So the stakeholder interviews are very, very important. You can also do a stakeholder survey, easy enough to do with SurveyMonkey, easy enough to survey your employees. An environmental scan is where you're looking at what are the trends and issues in the area that we're focused on. And a lot of that can be done easily through secondary online research. Peer review. Who are your peers? Maybe you call them your competitors. You're often competing for the same source of philanthropic dollars, so they are competitors, but we also call them peers. But what do you know about them? How are they positioned? So peer review, very important. All of that leads up into a SWOT analysis and a key findings report that we then bring to the second phase of our process. And this is a highlight of the process and can be for your organization as well. We call it a mission-driven strategic planning summit. It's a milestone event that brings together your core brain trust to engage deeply with your present state situation, the potential that's been identified, and the gaps between present state and ideal state. It's a chance to engage your board members, teams, outside advisors in a collaborative, highly productive session to develop the organization's vision, mission, operating principles, and strategic priorities. You want to have someone facilitating who knows how to keep the energy up in the room, that drives a lot of participation, that creates a safe place for people to really say what's on their hearts and minds. We actually ask everyone in our strategic planning processes to agree to take at least one risk during the session. And the sessions can last from an hour. Many of them are 8 hours. Sometimes some of our clients like to do a dinner the night before and have a working dinner and then an all-day session the next day. So that's our summit, and we come out of the summit with an ideal state action planning, which is a process, I'll throw another grad school term at you, neuro implementation, but it's a process that keeps an organization out of its defensiveness, out of any blame, out of any shame, and keeps it just with the data of what's so about the present state and where are we trying to get to and what are the quickest pathways to get there. So you end up with three flip charts of notes, a present state flip chart, an ideal state flip chart, and then pathways to move towards the ideal state. From there, we develop a strategic plan framework, and that's where we identify what the priorities are, the 5 priorities, and then we start to actually develop some of the action planning towards that to get that going. And then we also update the vision, mission, principles, as well as the strategic priorities. We brought you some examples of vision, and these will be in your PowerPoint slides that you get as well. Vision articulates the idealized impact and outcomes on the audiences you serve. A really well-written vision is future-oriented, realistic enough to be doable, but idealistic enough to require stretching. It's emotional, inspirational, reminds you of your why, and it answers the question, how will your world be different as the result of your organization's work? Here's some sample vision statement examples. So, National Multiple Sclerosis Society, a world free of MS. That's their vision. Habitat for Humanity, a world where everyone has a decent place to live. Kiva, a world where all people hold the power to create opportunity for themselves and others. Now let's talk to you about mission. A really good mission statement articulates how your organization goes about achieving its vision. So included in a mission, it's oriented in the present. It's an accurate and unique description, broad enough to allow for some flexibility, but specific enough to be distinct to your organization. It's clear, memorable, and concise. It's easy to communicate to others, and it answers the question, what do you do in the service of your vision? So now let's give you some mission examples, mission statement examples. Here's the American Red Cross, well-known organization. Its mission: prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. Charity Water, another nonprofit organization, says we're a nonprofit organization bringing clean, safe drinking water to people in developing countries. And then we wanted to take the Charity Water mission statement and just break it down for you to see sort of what the core elements of a good mission statement are. So here you can see, we call it fluff. It's really the setup. We're a nonprofit organization. Then you want in your mission statement both the action, the result, and who you're serving. And so this is also another good model when you're reviewing your mission statement to see if it's got these three elements in it. Operating principles, we've mentioned a couple times, very important, not really done on a regular basis. Operating principles articulate qualities, characteristics, or attributes that are desirable for the organization and its team to model. Operating principles provide guidelines informing behavioral and attitudinal norms that describe how members of the organization are expected to act and interact. They influence the culture and climate of the organization, and they inform operational and ethical decision-making. Operational principles answer the question, how will we be together, and what can we expect from one another? So when you look at operating principles, you can ask these questions. What principles do you have personally as an organizational leader or member of the team? What principles does your organization orient towards? Here are the principles our company has used for the better part of the last decade: excellence, urgency, and accountability. We talk to our clients about that. We know that those three principles oftentimes are not what our clients are oriented towards. They're oriented towards different principles. So they appreciate that we come in and we drive the work to a point of excellence. We bring a level of urgency and keep process moving, and also build in accountability. Who's going to do what in the during the strategic planning and in executing the plan. Examples of other principles you might consider: the principle of responsibility, aliveness, engagement, integrity. Customer focus is a principle. Workability, learning, continual improvement, empowerment, inclusiveness, and a popular one these days, transparency. And then the strategic priorities. In the strategic priority, we're articulating the high-level initiatives or areas that your organization focuses on over the course of the plan. So a little bit more about strategic priorities. It can be both internal and or external. They're representative of work that is critical to the success of your organization's mission and vision, and they reflect what is within your organization's sphere of influence, expertise, and action. And they answer the question, what are the pathways that will best fulfill your mission and vision and drive, fulfill your mission and drive towards your vision? Okay. So that brings us up to a phase we call the working group phase. So this happens after the summit, and the work then goes into working groups that are selected by the organization. They can be teams of employees, combination of employees and board members, other volunteers, other advisors you have. Really what you want to get is the right set of minds working on each area. And in each of the strategic priorities, the group is addressing the identified priority that was created at the summit and assesses the prioritization of objectives and sub-strategies. So it's creating a mini plan within the strategic priority. That group is also identifying resource needs and budget alignment, and it provides perspective on the organizational needs and realities to inform the development of attainable action plans. Then the strategic plan, once approved, goes into the implementation phase. And at this point, strategic planning is still going on because you're tracking how are we doing towards implementing the plan. You want to have a review progress system in place. Some organizations review their plans weekly. That makes us feel great. Some do it quarterly, monthly, quarterly, twice a year, once a year. Some only pull the plan out every 3 years and never really look at it again. We call that a mission-challenged organization. But in your review of your plan, you're not only reviewing progress, you're mapping milestones, creating accomplishments, celebrating accomplishments. Very important to keep celebrating and accentuating the positive, analyzing gaps, and reforecasting action plans. Some of the clients we've had a privilege to work with and have really helped us develop this methodology, our mission-driven strategic planning methodology. One is Blessings in a Backpack. Some of you may have heard it. It's a national organization still growing into its own. The organization mobilizes communities around the country to provide food on the weekends for grade school children across America who come from low-income households. So many of them live in homes where the cabinets are literally bare. So our mission-driven business strategy provided a structure for Blessing in a Backpack's future growth and helped align the organization towards its potential. So when they came to us, they were serving about 66,000 children a week during the school year with backpacks. And they said they wanted to grow to 150,000. And we worked with them, and when they were done with our planning process, they chose to increase their goal from 150,000 children weekly to 1 million children a week. And that was a big leap, growth mindset, seeing that their potential was way greater, and that they were willing to live with the anxiety of, how are we going to do this? And they're still in the middle of it. They happen to be right across the street from us, from our downtown Chicago office, so we run into the CEO regularly, and they're doing great. They're right on plan. They've grown 36% in the number of children receiving backpacks in the last 3 years. So at the end of this year, they'll be up to 90,000 backpacks in 2018 on their way to 1 million. Another client I wanted to show you is the News Literacy Project. This is a national education nonprofit offering nonpartisan, independent programs that teach high school students how to know what to believe in the digital age. Code name for this organization is Fake News. And in 2013, the News Literacy Project used our mission-driven business strategy to transform itself at the time from a grassroots program in 3 major urban markets. They were in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. And when they were done with our plan, they had a vision and a plan to become a digital classroom so that they could be used in classrooms all across the country. And so they achieved that, and they did that for several years, and they came back to our firm in 2017 following the November 2016 elections, where fake news kind of got put on the map for all of us. And they said they had a need to create a rapid expansion of their journalism curriculum. So they re-engaged our mission-driven business strategy for a new plan to steer the News Literacy Project into its next level of corporate maturity. It was time now to move from a very strong and charismatic and effective founder, but they had sort of those founder-led dominance dynamics in their organization, really much to their own admission, but they hadn't really looked at what it was costing them. And here they were with a big need to expand rapidly. So they have moved, they did the plan, it really engaged their board. They have a very powerful and influential board, but they weren't engaged. And through the process, they got engaged, and now they have an expanded and empowered staff a very engaged board with amazing connections, and they're often running at a time when, again, this is a nonpartisan issue, but just making sure that people understand what they can trust online. So we've just shared a lot with you. How might your organization benefit from a strategy that realigns your organization, your culture towards growth, transformation, and greater effectiveness? We'll be curious to hear some of your comments. We wanted to let you know that all of our curriculum is parked in our Mission Driver Institute, which is our digital shelf of all the curriculum we've developed over the last 14 years to support organizational leaders and leadership teams and the competencies of being mission drivers. Our vision is that every organization has a chief mission driver in its organization. And that's why I created the title for myself, because I wanted to model for our clients the value of having a chief mission driver alongside a chief executive, a chief financial officer, a chief programs officer, and the other leadership team members you have. The Mission Driver Institute is currently available to our strategic planning clients, but we wanted to let you know that in 2019, in the fall of 2019, we're going to debut our Mission Driver Institute, where we'll be training organizational leaders in our methodology to lead the development of mission-driven strategic business plans for their organization. So we'll have more information to share about that early in 2019. As next steps from this webinar today, we wanted to make two offers to you if they're helpful to you. First of all, we have a mission-driven versus mission-challenged assessment. It's short, quick, and easy to take, and we'd be happy to send it to you. If you are interested, please send an email to info@davidoffstrategy.com and write assessment in the subject line. And we'll send you the mission-driven versus mission-challenged assessment. You can take it for yourself, kind of to wrap your head around kind of where's our organization, where am I around mission-driven versus mission-challenged. And it's also great for group discussions. You can use it for leadership teams, use it for your whole organization. It can spark a lot of conversation. I should also say that we are all mission-driven and mission-challenged. All of our organizations are all mission-driven and mission-challenged. It's part of the human dynamic. So no one gets to beat themselves up here. We all have different parts that we're challenged. And if you ever run into someone who tells you they're not mission-challenged, you have a mission-challenged individual that you're talking to. Okay, the second offer is our mission-driven versus mission-challenged consultation. If you are interested, this is an opportunity to have 1 hour to work with one of our mission driver consultants in a 1-hour consult to help you identify where you and your organization are mission-driven and mission-challenged. And I think you'd be surprised how much you would get out of a complimentary 1 hour with one of our consultants. So if that's of interest to you, again, use the same email address, info@davidoffstrategy.com, and write consult in the subject line. And feel free to apply for both. So we are now ready for your questions and answers. You've been a great audience, and I appreciate your attention, and we'd like to really answer any questions that would be helpful to you.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And just a reminder to everyone, if you have a question, you can go to the questions portion of your toolbox and type it in, and we can read those out to John to answer. It looks like we don't have anything yet, but I'm sure a few will come in.
We'll give you a minute. We threw a lot at you today. So if there's anything you'd like clarification on, anything about who's leading the strategic planning in your organization, timing, costs, that sort of thing. I can tell you that generally in a strategic planning process, it's usually led, depending on the size of the organization, but even in the very biggest organizations we work with, it's often led by the chief executive. They may have someone that's sort of moving the process along administratively, but most chief executives want to be very involved in the planning process, and it's a chance for them to work closely with their board, oftentimes. And the best processes also have funders at the table, and it's a chance to create more cohesiveness with the funder and have them feel truly that their perspective really matters, and it's a great way to increase their investment in your organization at the same time.
So John, it looks like
you
partially answered part of Diane's question. She said, who should lead this and what does it cost?
Okay, great. Thanks, Diane, for your question. So chief executive, as I said, we had a substantial organization. It had about 100 employees. So the chief executive actually had someone on staff with the title of strategic planning director. So we worked with that person on a sort of a day-to-day basis on logistics and stuff, but there was no significant work done around strategic priorities or allocation of resources or that sort of thing without signing off with the chief executive. Costs are wide-ranging. There are organizations that will do this internally. I mean, your costs can be in engaging facilitation, and there's a wide range of facilitators. There's facilitators, and then there's consultants. I like more of the consultant, where someone or a team of people is really involved, helping challenge your organization, taking risks with your organization to really challenge it to look beyond the normal places it looks, to understand, really understand its potential and how to achieve that potential, and is also taking a really good look internally at the organization itself as well as externally. So, and you can find strategic planning consultants in most markets. And I think people have different approaches. We've put 14 years into our approach, so we haven't really seen anyone quite with the level of comprehensiveness that we've brought to this phase. But there's some wonderful strategic planning firms and individuals out there, so they come in a wide range of shapes, sizes, and costs. Our next article that we're writing might interest all of you. It's going to be that it's not good enough for an organization just to have a mission-driven strategic plan. It's also not good enough for an organization just to be high-performing. It's really bringing together a mission-driven strategic plan along with a high-performing culture. We believe that that's what really creates an accelerated process towards achieving outcomes. Any other questions?
Yes, it looks like we have 3 more for you. So the first one is, how long does this process typically take?
Okay, great question. Thanks, Melissa. On average, a good strategic planning process can take anywhere between 3 months and 9 months. The variables in there tend to be how many people are involved, and sometimes there's urgency. Depending on when you get started, you may need to have it completed in time for budget planning for your next fiscal year. Other times, you're able to go a little bit longer. We do think it's important to have a combination of keeping the process moving, at the same time allowing it to breathe. And because of all of the digging and data that we bring to the table, we definitely are demanding, particularly on a strategic planning committee, which I didn't really speak to, but it's good if the board can appoint a strategic planning committee, and usually this is no more than 6 or 8 people, and it can be a combination of board members, members from the staff, could be outside advisors. Again, you could have a funder in there, you could have a donor, you might have a volunteer, executive, that kind of thing. And the strategic planning committee is kind of moving the process along. So when you get to the summit, they've been the sounding board for making all of the plans. They're the sounding board that reviews first drafts of the actual plan. And technically, they're the group that brings the recommended final plan to the board for the official vote on approval of the plan.
Okay, 2 more questions for you. Is it necessary to have the words "we are a nonprofit organization" in your mission statement?
Definitely not. You do not need that in your mission statement. There may be, that may be sensitive to the context where you're using your mission statement, and especially if it can be confusing whether you're a for-profit. If you come across as a for-profit and you may need to let people know you're a nonprofit, that would be the real reason probably to have it in your mission statement. But I think it sort of probably depends on your specific situation.
How does financial modeling of the ideal state play into the strategic priority setting?
Oh, great. So important. And that's almost a whole other workshop that we do and can do. But the short answer is that financial modeling is really critical, and is probably something that most organizations resist the most at paying attention to. And that's why I started with at least the income side of the financial modeling. It's really important that all of the strategic planning process understand that at the end of the day, we need to raise money. We need to bring in more resources. We need to bring more strategic partners to the table. So that's a very important orientation. At the same time, it's also important that the strategic plan reflect efficiencies on the expense side. And that ideally you can bring a return on investment analysis to everything that you do. We had a nonprofit client recently who had done their strategic plan already, but when they came to us, they wanted to start a new budgeting approach for their annual business planning. So they asked us to put together a process that would literally develop a new budgeting approach, working from the strategic plan that was already done, and translate the strategic plan into essentially a strategic budgeting process that would mirror the strategic plan. And it was very successful. And they're in their 3rd year now using the new strategic budgeting process as a follow-up step to the strategic planning process.
It looks like we have one more question that came in. Excuse me. So
Great.
How soon after startup of the organization should we implement a strategic plan, especially considering costs involved?
Well, ideally, the strategic plan would be part of a startup of an organization that you would do it even before opening your doors. But it sounds like that's not the situation here, which is fine. Organizations get started for a lot of different reasons. And I think particularly among nonprofits, they get started out of passion for an issue. That news literacy project case study I showed you earlier was literally started in the basement of a guy who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist with a very recognizable newspaper, and he got this idea talking to his daughter's sixth grade class, and realized how much they didn't really understand how to decipher what you could trust and not trust on the internet. So he kind of started this, with his heart, and then sort of added the pieces. And it was 10 years later that we got him to move out of the bunker in his basement in his Washington, D.C. home. So I would say as soon as you can would be the answer. And I've given you a very comprehensive approach to strategic planning. You could take the same model and do it in a couple hours. You could get people in and do it on bring in pizzas and do it over dinner one night, or do it on a Saturday morning. It's not going to have the same level of comprehension and critical thought, but it's a start. And the important thing is to just pick parts of the methodology that work for you and your organization and where it is now, and keep working towards the full process. And that may take, for some of you, several years. Others of you may be ready to embrace a process of this nature right now.
Wonderful. It looks like that is the end of our questions. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, if that is okay with you, John.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure being with you. And I'll tell you, at the end of our weekly staff meeting, I have everyone, or we all have each other stand up, and we say with great gusto, "Mission drivers, drive on." And so I send you all off with the gusto of our team here at Davidoff, and wish you well in driving mission. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And we want to thank you for joining us today for our expert speaker series. And again, we want to thank John for his time. We hope you enjoyed the presentation and that you will join us for future events and webinars. You can find our upcoming webinars and events by visiting us at jmtconsulting.com and clicking the Events tab. That concludes our webinar today, and I hope everyone has a good rest of the day. Thank you.